We now come to the debate on UK security and entry clearance. Siobhan MacDonagh to move the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that this House has considered UK security and entry clearance procedures. With extremism on the rise and increasing threats to our national security, tightening up UK entry clearance procedures should be the top priority. But sadly, we have increasingly taken for granted that our borders are policed and secure from non-UK threats. Mr. Speaker, I sought to bring this issue before Parliament following the brutal murder of the Glasgow shopkeeper, Mr. Asad Shah, in March this year. Mr. Shah was murdered by an Islamic extremist who violently hated Mr. Shah's peaceful Ahmadi Muslim views. His killer, Tanveer Ahmed, declared he killed Mr. Shah in order to, and I quote, protect the honour of Islam. Mr. Shah's brutal murder, the first of its kind on UK soil, holds terrible implications for this country. The radical extremist Islamist views that inspired this have been fanned by extremist preachers from outside the UK, being allowed to come into this country and spread their hate. And our entry clearance regulations have failed to stop this from happening. Anti-Ahmadi hate preachers are being let into the UK as we speak, calling on Ahmadi Muslims to be killed on account of their faith. For instance, just a month after Mr. Shah's murder, a prominent anti-Ahmadi preacher from Pakistan was touring UK mosques with his message of hate. After the discovery, I requested an urgent meeting with the Home Secretary and senior representatives from the Ahmadi Muslim community. I was grateful to have met with the Home Secretary, but I was extremely disappointed by the fact that reforming entry clearance procedures did not seem to be a priority. Nor did the Home Secretary seem to be aware of this particular radical extremist preacher having been allowed into the UK. Indeed, it's no exaggeration to say that I left the meeting with a genuine fear for UK security and a grim surprise that we have not seen even more anti-Ahmadi terrorism on UK soil. I had no reservation in saying that the inadequate Home Office entry clearance procedures are allowing entry of individuals who pose a direct threat to our democracy and our social cohesion, and I will be highlighting why it is so urgent that the Home Office tackles this immediate problem now. As a side point, it's extremely ironic that while individuals who spread hate are allowed into the UK, every MP will be aware of a large number of completely law-abiding Pakistani citizens refused entry clearance to attend weddings, funerals and other important family events, also as a result of problems around Home Office entry clearance. I want to turn now to a case study which highlights the gravity of the situation. Mufti Muhammad Hanif Qureshi is a radical Islamist cleric from Pakistan who has recently been allowed into the UK to spread the sort of anti-Ahmadi hate that murdered peaceful Mr. Asad Shah. To clarify, the Ahmadi Muslim community, which Mr. Shah belonged to, is a persecuted religious group in Pakistan. The Ahmadis live by their message of love for all, hatred for none, and they categorically reject terrorism in any form. But despite how well established and peaceful this community is, Ahmadi Muslims are victims of terrible injustice, as they do not believe that Muhammad was the final prophet sent to guide mankind. They face accusations of heresy amongst Orthodox Muslims, and at worst they faced extreme violence in Pakistan and now sadly in the UK too. Anti-blasphemy and anti-terror laws are wrongly used against them in Pakistan. They are murdered on the grounds of their faith. To this day, they are branded worse than apostates by hardliners and forbidden by the state to call themselves Muslims. Indeed, the intolerance and hatefulness has made its way to the UK. The Muslim Council of Britain have long been criticised for not acting to counter anti-Ahmadi hatred, partly because it does not recognise the Ahmadis as Muslims either. But Mr. Asad Shah in Glasgow was the first Ahmadi Muslim to be murdered on UK soil on grounds of his faith. And Mufti Hanif Qureshi is an individual who is greatly responsible for spreading these messages of hate. He is the founder of Shabab-e-Islami and is well known for his virulent anti-Ahmadi preaching in Pakistan, the sort of which inspired the murder of Mr. Shah. For instance, in a recording of a sermon Qureshi delivered in 2014, which is freely available on YouTube, he said with regard to Ahmadi Muslims, "Let them know, those who consider Sunnis as cowards, that Allah has honoured us with the courage and power to strangulate those involved in blasphemy, to cut out their tongues, and to riddle their bodies with bullets. For this, nobody can arrest us under any law." Indeed, these sorts of highly inflammatory and hateful sermons have incited others to commit violence and murder. In 2011, Pakistani politician Salman Taseer, who opposed Pakistan's anti-Ahmadi laws, was shot dead by his bodyguard, Mumtaz Qadri. After his arrest, Qadri said that he had been inspired to act by a 2010 sermon delivered by Qureshi in Rawalpindi, in which the cleric branded the likes of Taseer as deserving to be killed under Islamic law. Qureshi was arrested after Taseer's murder, but was later released and continued to defend the murder in public sermons before Qadri was executed in January of this year. The shameful hate preacher who inspired the murder of a prominent Pakistani politician just a few years ago was last month allowed to enter the country without any problem, despite the murder of Mr. Asad Shah in Glasgow just months before. Could the Home Office not make the connection between the incitement of anti-Ahmadi hatred and the committing of murder? Just last month, Qureshi spoke at a Luton mosque on May the 4th, where, according to the mosque's spokesperson, he made a very impressive speech to an audience of hundreds. This event also doubled up as the 36th annual Khatmi Nabawat meeting at the Luton Mosque. This movement, translated as the finality of the Prophet, has been implicated in the violent persecution of members of the Ahmadi religious sect in the UK and Pakistan. Despite this, it is a registered charity in the UK and is listed on the Charity Commission website. Honourable members may well be aware that Khatmi Nawab is also well known for its anti-Ahmadi views and regularly invites preachers from Pakistan to visit the UK on speaking tours and to spread the message of hate. Qureshi is just one example. His words have incited violence in Pakistan, and they will incite violence in this country too. Qureshi should be banned from ever travelling to Britain, given the context of anti-Ahmadi sentiment in the UK and growing religious violence across Europe. His message of hate has no place here. How on earth could he have been granted entry clearance? A quick Google search brings up hundreds of English-language news stories about his preaching, and yet the basic level of research was apparently beyond the Home Office. And yet I was stunned after my meeting with the Home Secretary, where we were informed that the Pakistan High Commission had only recently hired a specialist Urdu section for their intelligence office. So up until recently, it seems there may have been nobody at the High Commission in Islamabad who actually understood some of the watch lists in the language unless translated into English. How can our anti-extremist measures be so weak that such terrible oversights occur? And while our UK authorities seem to lack the basic linguistic resources to identify extremist threats, we do know that extremist rhetoric can change to moderate for the English-speaking media and then revert to extremist for Urdu speakers. It is therefore much easier for radicals like Qureshi to switch between the two. The case study of Qureshi is important because we tend to take for granted that our borders are policed and protected for individuals who might cause harm in our country. We all lead our lives in the hopeful confidence that the Home Office and immigration officials are able to refuse entry clearance to any person who deemed undesirable. We put our faith in government departments and agencies to protect our democracy and police. As far as I know, there is no exhaustive list of reasons why someone's visa application can be rejected by UK authorities, but there is a list of unacceptable behaviours which would lead to a person being refused entry to or excluded from the UK. Qureshi seems to me to fulfil all of these criteria. These include using any means to express views which seek to justify or glorify terrorist violence, or incites or provokes other commitment such as terrorist acts, or fosters hatred which might lead to intercommunity violence in the UK. Exclusion is not targeted against any specific group. They can and have included far-right extremists, homophobic extremists, and Christian, Jewish and Islamist extremists. In a speech delivered in November 2014, the Home Secretary said that she had excluded hundreds of people from the UK, suggesting that these powers are sometimes enforced. She stated that 61 people had been excluded on national security grounds, 72 who were not conducive to the public good, and 84 who were hate preachers. So why was Qureshi able to enter the country just a month after his brand of anti-Ahmadi hatred had inspired the murder of the peaceful Glasgow shopkeeper? The expression...
The Honourable Member give way. I thank the Honourable Member for giving way, and I'm very, very grateful to her for bringing this debate, because the murder of Mr Shah in Glasgow absolutely shocked all of us in the city. Would she agree with me that while hate preachers such as she has described are able to come into the country, the Ahmadiyya community in Glasgow and the rest of the UK can't really have confidence that this UK government is keeping them safe?
I would completely accept the comments that the Honourable Members identifies. The expressions of hatred we have seen across the country, particularly ever since the referendum vote was announced last week, should show us the importance of preventing extremism by all means. Quite simply, it threatens the fabric of our democracy and social cohesion. Even more so, Mr Shah's murder demonstrates how high the stakes are. Back in 2005, in the wake of the London bombings, the then Home Secretary, Charles Clarke, said that the government departments and intelligence agencies were working together to establish a full database of individuals around the world of dangerous people, and that such information would be available to visa and immigration staff and added to the UK's warning index. Of course, we cannot know the details of Home Office and intelligence workings, but we can assume, given the admission of Qureshi to the UK just last month, that this may not be working. And history teaches us the consequence that occur when the Home Office does not do its job properly. Take the example of Pakistani cleric Masood Azhar, who delivered extreme messages across the UK back over 40 mosques in the early 90s. At the time of his tour, he was chief organiser of the prominent Pakistani jihadist group, Harkat-ul-Mujahideen. We now know that Azhar, who was himself close to Osama bin Laden, planted the seeds of extremism from his 1993 UK tour to later inspire at least 2 Britons who went on to plan the London bombings of 2005 and the beheading of US journalist David Pearl. One would hope that UK authorities had learned their lessons, and yet the admission of Qureshi suggests that not as much has really changed. Take the short report, Student Rights, Tackling Extremism on Campuses, published by the Henry Jackson Society earlier this year, which detailed a range of individuals, many of whom have expressed extremist and hateful views, who were given a platform at UK universities, mainly in London, in the last year. These include South African politician Mr Julius Malema, convicted of a hate crime just a few years ago, Mr Asim Khan, who has compared homosexuality to incest and burglary, theft and sex abuse, and Mr Suleiman Ghani, who has expressed sectarian attitudes towards Ahmadi, claiming that they are not Muslims. The UK Ahmadi community and the very fabric of our democracy is under threat now more than ever. In April of this year, leaflets calling for members of the Ahmadi Muslim community to be killed have allegedly been distributed in universities, mosques and shopping centres in London. One leaflet distributed widely in Stockwell, for example, entitled Kadanis, a pejorative name for Ahmadis, describes Ahmadi as dualist infidels and worse than apostate. It prescribes the same punishment that is dealt for apostates or those who denounce their own religion, giving Ahmadis 3 days to denounce their faith or else be awarded capital punishment. We also know that Scottish mosques are becoming increasingly radicalised in the wake of Mr Shah's murder. Meanwhile, anti-Ahmadi conferences have taken place in Slough just a month ago. The threat posed to our society is real and it's imminent. And And now, inept Home Office entry clearance procedures have allowed hate preachers like Qureshi, who has called for death penalties for Ahmadi Muslims amongst UK Muslim communities. These are dangerous times for our democracy, and the precedent for racial and religious hatred is huge. It is terrifying to see the British government has adopted such a double standard. At one end, it seeks to crush all extremism. We know from the recent terrible atrocities that this goal is more important than ever. And yet the government still gives visas to people like Qureshi who incite tolerance and even violence in our society. There should have been an absolute storm of anger following Mr. Shah's death. Just hours before he was murdered, he posted a message of peace and love on Facebook to his Christian friends on the occasion of Good Friday. Hours later, he was brutally murdered outside the shop by a religious extremist. Why haven't we called out Mr. Shah's murder for what it is, religious hate crime? Is it because we can't be bothered to understand the victims of Islamic extremism include other Muslims as well as non-Muslims? I shudder at the thought that we do not take Mr. Shah's death more seriously. I am well aware that developing stronger Home Office entry clearance structures to screen out individuals like Qureshi from ever being able to come to this country are just part of the problem. Internet and social media communications mean that pan-national extremist and terrorist threats can spread beyond borders in seconds. But allowing such hatred to enter our borders is almost legitimising or endorsing their hate. Qureshi and all those who express his hateful views have no place in our country. Today, more than ever, we have to ensure that such individuals are not able to come here and spread their hateful message under the banner of free speech. In particular, I wish to ask the following questions to the Minister. To what extent can the Home Office check if a person has promoted hate and extremism when a visa application is made? How does the government monitor hate speech in Pakistan and elsewhere to help inform their visa decisions? Does the UK government give equal weight to hate speech, whether committed online, on TV, or in any media, including social media? How can individuals or organisations in Pakistan or the UK provide information on such matters that would be of use? What procedures will it put in place to make this easier? I sincerely hope that the Home Office sits up and takes seriously the deep flaws that are jeopardising security and social cohesion as we speak. Only then can we claim to have a society which promotes love for all and hatred for none, the Ahmadi ideal that we should all seek to live by.
This is considered UK security and entry clearance procedures. Minister.
Thank you, Sir Roger, and it's a privilege to serve under your chairmanship. And can I, at the outset, congratulate the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden for securing this debate and for highlighting what I think is an extremely important issue. The whole factors of hatred in our society and extremism are ones that we must challenge in all different forms. And she highlighted the appalling murder of Mr. Asad Shah in respect of the faith that he proffered. And that is something that we utterly condemn, and as a government we do take with the greatest of seriousness in combating those who would sow hatred in our country, in our communities, that might in some way inspire others to take action against our own citizens for the faith that they profess. I can say to the Honourable Lady that I have had extensive contact with the Ahmadi community over a number of years, visiting the mosque in Morden, and also I've had the privilege to sit down with His Holiness as well to talk through a number of issues, including those of how we combat extremism, how we combat terrorism. And I'm very clear of the enormous contribution that the Ahmadi community make to our society and our culture here in the UK. And I, for one, would be one that would stand up and defend their right to profess their faith and to practice their faith without fear of any intimidation or any violence being taken against them. So I can certainly assure her at the outset of my personal commitment on these issues and the steps that I have taken over a number of years to work with the Ahmadi community and the respect that I have for them and the work that they do in so many different ways. The Honourable Lady highlighted in her contribution a number of points as to confronting extremism and also in terms of the way in which our visa processes operate. And perhaps I may respond to her to give her reassurance on the importance that we attach to this and the steps that are taken to prevent preachers of hate from coming into this country. I'm unable to comment on individual cases as to those that are subject to orders and otherwise, but I would like to perhaps take her through some of the processes and procedures that we do adopt, and equally in underlining that this Home Secretary has banned more hate speakers than any other Home Secretary that has preceded her, and her commitment to this. It does give me the opportunity to clarify that we do have robust policies and procedures in place to ensure that foreign nationals who seek to undermine the national security and values of the UK through violence and hatred can be prevented from coming here to do so. Visas, entry clearances are important tools in reducing illegal immigration, tackling organised crime and protecting national security. Visas allow us to intervene before someone arrives in the UK. The information provided in the application process enables us to identify links we would otherwise not have known about and, where appropriate, prevent someone from coming to the UK by refusing a visa. Of course, it is of paramount importance that immigration processes we have in place ensure that individuals who have come to notice as a threat to the UK's security and society, or who may present such a threat, are prevented from coming here to spread their messages and incite violence. Visas are an important part of our immigration system, which is fair to legitimate migrants and tough on those who flout the rules. We do have strong processes in place at all stages: visa application, leave to enter and extension of stay, to provide assurance that appropriate checks are being made before any leave is granted. UKVI staff play a critical role in distinguishing between those who are entitled to come to the UK to stay here and those who are not. This requires appropriate application of the immigration rules and a series of checks on individuals to make accurate decisions to help keep the UK safe and secure. The Border Force and UK visas and immigration operating mandates require specific checks to be made and referral to experts where necessary. Entry clearance officers also receive a range of training to support them in identifying individuals who may pose a threat to the UK. For those who need a visa to come to the UK, the application process requires the applicant to declare any criminality or immigration offence and to provide their facial image and fingerprints as biometrics. Entry clearance officers are required to check a range of databases, including biometric, Home Office and police databases, for any traces of the applicant's history. The biometrics fix the identity of the applicant so that entry clearance officers can identify the same individual in the future, and important information is also provided about the applicant's immigration history, including any travel ban or exclusion order is available, even if, for instance, they change their name or seek to conceal their identity. In addition, applicants must qualify for entry under the immigration rules and will normally be refused a visa or leave to enter or remain if they do not. The Authority to Carry scheme, operated by the National Border Force Targeting Centre, means that carriers, including airlines, require authority to carry individuals to the UK. That authority may be refused for any individual who has been excluded from the UK, whom the Home Secretary is in the process of making the subject of an exclusion order, or who is the subject of United Nations or EU travel restrictions. If authority to carry a specific individual is refused and that individual is carried to the UK, the carrier will be liable to a financial penalty of up to £50,000. Our processes on arrival at the border also include full checks against Home Office databases, providing further assurance. I will give way.
This is a dialogue of the deaf. I am explaining to you a case that has happened where an individual has been granted entry clearance, who has been cited as the cause for a murder that happened in Pakistan and a murder that's happened in the UK. This man was granted entry clearance. Could we address the issue?
Well, as I've already stated in my comments, I'm unable to comment on those who are or who are not subject to exclusion orders or to comment on individual cases for sound legal reasons. But I'm trying to explain in my contribution the steps that are taken, and indeed I will come on to the whole process of exclusion orders as well, which is, I think, at the heart of what the Honourable Lady is talking about, and equally the steps that our special unit within the Home Office that sits alongside to analyse information, that is a core part of the activities that are undertaken by the Home Office in that way. But we are very clear that the current threat that the UK faces from extremists is unprecedented. The government is taking a stronger stance to ensure that extremist ideas do not gain a foothold here and challenge this country's values of tolerance, respect and democracy. We have acted to protect our communities by publishing our counter-extremism strategy based on 4 pillars: countering extremist ideology, building a partnership with all who are opposed to extremism, disrupting extremists and building more cohesive communities. The strategy will challenge all forms of extremism. The government, however, can only do this in partnership with all those who want to defeat extremism and build a stronger Britain. As Her Majesty the Queen recently announced to Parliament, the government intends to introduce a counter-extremism and safeguarding bill to provide stronger powers for the government and law enforcement agencies to protect the public from extremists. The government will consult on new powers for disrupting extremists before they are introduced. But to take in specifics this issue of exclusion, the Home Secretary does have the power to exclude from the UK those foreign nationals whose presence she considers would not be conducive to the public good, or if their exclusion is justified on grounds of public policy or public security. A person may be excluded for a range of reasons, including national security, criminality, and unacceptable behaviour. There is no time limit on exclusion, and a person who is excluded remains so until the Home Secretary lifts the exclusion. This means that anyone excluded by the Home Secretary who applies for entry clearance or leave to enter must be refused, so long as the exclusion remains in force. Such a power is very serious, and no decision is taken lightly or as a means of stopping open debate. All decisions have to be based on sound evidence and must be proportionate, reasonable and consistent. And while I cannot comment on particular cases, this Home Secretary has excluded from the UK over 100 hate preachers since May 2010, more than any previous Home Secretary. And I can say that our Special Cases Unit does work with language experts, looking at social media, looking at other forms of media, and working with experts as well to identify those who may pose a threat and therefore may need to be considered for such action. And I think that there is that sense of purpose and the seriousness at which these issues are taken by the Home Office in respect of those who could pose a threat. Of course, I give way one last time.
How many Urdu speakers are there in the specialist unit?
Well, perhaps I can write to the Honourable Lady, given the time available, with detail on the work that is undertaken around this, with further detail on those that are involved and the steps that are taken, because I think that certainly, whilst I know that she and I have had some exchanges on these issues previously, obviously I'm very happy to provide further detail and information, and equally to reflect on some of the further questions that she has highlighted in her opening comments, to the extent that I have not responded or addressed those specifically during the course of this debate. But I would like to underline the unprecedented nature of the threat that the UK faces from extremism, with extremists using the internet to spread their ideologies quickly and on a scale that we have not seen before. That is why we have come forward with those new approaches in relation to combating and confronting extremism, how we recognise the challenge that we do face in our communities if extremism takes root. And again, she was absolutely right to highlight the appalling murder of Mr. Shah and the impact that that I know had in the community in Glasgow. And I certainly recognise that, and why I make the points that I do in the very firm and clear way in which I'm doing that. to underline our utter condemnation for any acts of violence, the appalling nature of the murder of Mr. Shah, and equally the resolve and intent of this government to confront all forms of extremism, including the identification of those who may wish to travel to the UK and peddle their hate and peddle their ideology, and to ensure that we continue to take action to prevent their travel to the UK, to safeguard our communities and confront extremism in all of its forms.
The question is that this House has considered UK security and entrance clearance procedures. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Ayes have it. Order. Order.